Hi guys, April 5th, 2020. Everybody's still at home because we are practicing social distancing. I actually had a craving, my husband and I had a craving for butter mochi muffins. And these were little sweet treats that we would get from Boba Guys when they were still open. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 closures of a bunch of restaurants and cafes, they had to close all their locations. But that's when I first had these mochi muffins. They are gluten-free, made with rice flour, some coconut milk, and they are nice and squishy on the inside. If you've ever had mochi ice cream, the outer kind of glutinous, stretchy, chewy covering, that's what these muffins are like, except when you bake them, you caramelize the sugar on the outside so you get that nice crunch on the outside and that chewiness in the middle. I got the recipe from Snixy Kitchen. She does a bunch of amazing gluten-free treats, so I'm just going to walk you through the process of what I did following her recipe. Come along. Just wanted to quickly talk about a couple of things that might be a little bit lesser known or might be a little bit different from what you're used to with regular baking. So we're using Mochi sweet rice flour, which is different from regular rice flour. This is made with a shorter grain rice and it is like a little bit more glutinous. And you can also find it in the Asian grocer as glutinous rice flour. I've tried the recipe with both and they actually turn out quite similar. So if you don't have access to this one will also work. Again, you want to look for glutinous rice flour, not just regular rice flour, because it's not going to have that same kind of texture. One more thing. A quick note on coconut milk. There are many kinds of coconut milk out there. You want the full fat regular coconut milk. We're not looking for a light coconut milk. We're not looking for a coconut cream. The regular full fat coconut milk has everything that you need, the right amount of fat content. So this is what you want. You can find many brands and they're very accessible in just American grocers now, not just Asian grocers. So whatever brand should work. The next thing we're going to do is I'm actually making mini muffins today. That's our oven preheating. And I'm going to bake them at about the same temperature, maybe a little higher, but for a much shorter amount of time. So I believe the recipe from Snixy Kitchen calls for regular sized muffins in, regular 12 muffin tin. And she bakes for about 50 to 55 minutes at 350. I'm gonna bump the temp up to 360 and I'm actually going to bake for about 30-35 minutes. And I want the nice caramelized outside so that it has a nice crunch when I bite into it and a soft, glutinous, stretchy inside. And again, I am having the recipe today, so when you follow along, make sure that you either do the full size or kind of scale it to whatever you want to scale it to. One of the other things I'm going to do today is I'm not going to be using a stand mixer or anything like that, and I'm going to try to get this all done in 2 bowls. So we're minimizing how much equipment we're using, we're minimizing how much dishes we have to do, because I know everyone's at home, you're probably so tired of doing dishes. All right, here we go. All right, because we're going to cut everything in half, I just need to make sure all my measurements are done correctly. So this is butter straight out of the fridge, and this is 2 ounces of butter, and we're gonna need half of this. Put it in the microwave and get it melted. So that's what we're doing here. I'm gonna put this in the microwave. Don't get rid of your extra butter though, because we're going to be digging into this and then using it to butter our muffin pans. So keep it out so that it softens just a little bit, or get a little bit of extra butter out to help grease up your pan before you bake. Butter is nice and melted. All the big bits are gone. I'm going to set this aside and kind of let it cool just a little bit while we get all the other ingredients ready. Get your handy dandy scale out. Very important. Grab a mixing bowl, put it on here, tare it so that we can zero out our scale. Now we're going to weigh all of our ingredients. I'm going to be using this rice flour today, and according to the recipe, we're going to need 160 grams of this. So make sure you're in the right unit. Got a little bit of extra in there. 161, 160. All right, good enough. We're gonna tare it and then add in our brown sugar, 100 grams. 100 grams. I'm gonna add in our baking powder and salt. So here's all of our dry ingredients. That includes our sweet rice flour, the dark brown sugar, baking powder, and salt. I'm gonna set this aside for a little bit, finish up the wet stuff, and then add the wet to the dry. We're gonna grease our muffin tins and everything like that, and then get it divided and baked. So at this time, it's great to go preheat your oven to 350 or 360, depending on what size mochi muffins you're gonna be making. All right, so we've got our melted butter that's cooled just a little bit. We're putting that on the scale because we're going to put in our coconut milk now. So zero it out, we're gonna be at ounces. And I'm actually going to put in 6.5 ounces. The recipe that's doubled calls for a little more than that. It asks you to use the whole container, but I find that just a little bit less gives me a slightly more dense, chewy texture. So I'm gonna go for 6.5 ounces right into the butter. And this should be room temperature so that it doesn't cause the butter to kind of solidify because of the temp. So we're looking for 6.5 ounces. Almost there. All right. Oh, we went a little over. Give that a good mix. Drop the egg in there. Give it another good mix. I'm gonna move the scale. We're gonna put in just a little bit of molasses. If you're not comfortable with eyeballing, please make sure that you actually measure. And vanilla. Give that a good mix. I want to make sure everything's quite incorporated. So I'm just using my spatula, giving it a good mixing. Now we're going to add the wet into the dry and mix to incorporate. I had about 1/10 of an extra ounce of coconut milk, so I'm not going to worry about the little bit at the bottom here, just to compensate for that a little bit. And then get it nicely combined. This batter is going to feel different from cake batter. It's a little bit looser and a little bit more gummy, I want to say. Even that, I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be negative, but I feel like that's the only way I could describe it. So mix it up vigorously. You're not using a stand mixer here. And it does help to give the dry ingredients a little bit of a whisk before you incorporate it, but definitely forgot to do that just now, and I think we'll be okay. These little bits here that you see are the brown sugar that's kind of sat for a while, so just smash it around the side of the bowl and break that up. Batter's done. We're going to set that aside for a couple minutes while we grease our muffin pan. This is a 24 cavity mini muffin pan, but I know I'm only going to be using between 12 and 15 of the tins. So I'm actually going to butter just 12 of them, see how much batter that takes up, and then as needed, I am going to butter more. So remember that butter I asked you to set out. This is when it comes in handy. If it's still a little cool, that's okay. We're just going to rip off a little chunk with our bare hands. Get dirty. And we're gonna go ahead and get it in all around. And really use your fingers to get the butter well greased in each cavity that you'll be using in your muffin tin. Now we've got our greased mini muffin tin, and we are going to portion out our batter amongst the tins. So I like to make things easy and use a 3 tablespoon scoop. I find that it is just about the exact amount that I need to put in the tin. We don't want to overfill it. You can leave a tiny bit of batter still in it, and so it's about 1 scant scoop of a 3 tablespoon scoop that goes in it. Going to top our mochi muffins with some toasted sesame seeds. And this part is optional, but it really lends a nice flavor to your mochi muffin cakes. Also, you notice I didn't fill them all the way up to the top. We're about 80% full. They do expand a little, not quite like American traditional muffins, but they do increase in height. I really like toasted sesame seeds, so I like to throw a lot on there. And then we're going to do the white variety. Alright, so my mochi cake muffins are in the oven, and because they are minis, we are going to bake them a little differently. They're being baked at 360 for 17 minutes, and then we're going to rotate them so that there's an even bake, and then another 17 minutes. A quick tip to ensure an even bake, we're going to fill the empty muffin tins halfway with some water, and that way the heat will be more even throughout. Tessa wants to help, as usual, right Tessa? So we are about halfway through our bake, and let's see what they look like. They've started to rise, and I'm just here to rotate it, get all that steam. And then we're gonna put it on for another 17 minutes. Oop, Frey's here to help too. Hey Frey! We're gonna let it bake for another 16, 17 minutes, and then we'll be done. These just came out of the oven. They seem very hard on top, and I'm going to transfer them to a cooling rack to cool all the way so that they stay crispy on the outside. These are so good. So chewy on the inside. Look at that. So good. They're very addicting. They're not too sweet, so it's very easy to eat. Way too many. I jokingly tell people that I'm putting on the COVID-19 pounds. It's like the freshman 15, but COVID-19. So if they sit out, they will kind of, like anything else, lose their crispiness. If you want to refresh them over the course of a couple of days, you generally just store them in an airtight container, and then when you're ready to have one, put it in a toaster oven for a couple minutes. You should crisp up that outside right away. You probably saw this when we did the pan on the ingredients. This is not a normal amount of baking powder. No normal person needs this amount, but for somebody who bakes for a living, I gotta have this much baking powder.